bring this council meeting of September 20th to order at 6:03. Standing for the prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Asking for any disclosure of pecuniary interest with our agenda tonight. Having seen none, we will go along to number 5, announcements, councillor announcements, starting with Darrell. Councillor McLaughlin.
It's not an announcement, it's more of a report. I attended the Pat Seymour Memorial Golf Tournament. It was great, and they did a great job. I think there was about 44 golfers, and I don't know, maybe 60 or 70 for supper. So for a first attempt, I thought they did really well, and maybe next year we'll get some more support. I think what it needs to do is it needs to be publicized more, and we would have had a lot more turnout. But anyway, just to let everybody know, I did attend, and it was a fantastic day.
It was at that.
Okay. And the plowing match was a tremendous success. I don't know, Hal, do you know how many tractors there were? Did you ever hear?
I actually don't know the number, but I do know they had to make a third line. They've never had to do that before. Yeah,
I know the attempt was for 150, and I don't know if they got that far or not. Oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
I thought there was more than that. It was a great day anyway.
Oh, and the weather was very good actually for the day. Councillor Olmsted.
Yeah, again, same as Darrell, not really an announcement, just a report back from the township. Had its first ever junior hockey game last Saturday night. Our new Whitewater Kings. It was a great success on many fronts. Great attended. I think over 500 people were there. Over 400 paid to get in. A few slipped through the door, like the mayor and the MP Cheryl Gallant and MPP Don Yakovsky.
I paid.
Oh, actually, you did probably pay. But I want to thank all of those people for coming to the game and making it a great success. Everything was a success, as I say. The bar was a great success. Lots of entertainment, no hiccups, and they won in overtime.
Yes, they did.
So, really, really good event.
Thank you. It was almost 5 minutes before they scored. They had 2 really good goalies. Both teams had excellent goalies, so they had to earn their stripes that night. But yeah, it was great. And we have a great team, and we've got lots of local guys on the team, so it's really good to watch. Yep. This Saturday night, 7 o'clock. Councillor Mackay.
Nothing for me, Hal.
Councillor Regier.
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Reeve Miller.
I have nothing. It's just good to be back.
And I would just like to thank everybody that showed up for the big events all weekend. That it just shows the support from this municipality, what we have internally. It's absolutely amazing. Volunteers and support to the community. It's just amazing. And it was a pleasure to dance with our tractors again after 4 years of and let me tell you, that was pretty interesting. 3 practices, and it took 2.5 before we actually figured out what we used to do. Pretty nervous going in. Anyway, okay. So we shall move on to our presenters.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm invitation to share a little bit of information with you on a very important topic that matters to all of us as individuals and to communities. I want to acknowledge Bonnie Johnson, who is very familiar to most of you here. She's accompanying me here tonight, and I think it was Bonnie's initial conversations with some individuals across the community, and I want to acknowledge Jordan has established a small working group, and this really started as an informal conversation and just exploring some of the possibilities, and that led us to an opportunity for me to share some information, hopefully that you'll find helpful and interesting, and then we'll have an ask of you should you be interested. There will be an opportunity for a few questions and answers depending on, you have a very robust agenda tonight, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. This is a very brief presentation, and we'll move through the slides quickly. They're really intended to be speaking points, and then we'll really talk about how this is relevant and how perhaps there could be interest and uptake in the municipality. So by way of introduction, this presentation, as I mentioned, reflects some work that's already being done in the eastern counties by our partner organization there, the Alzheimer's Society of Cornwall and District. The Dementia Society of Ottawa and Renfrew County, we're approaching you as the township to see how you might begin to consider building what we're calling a dementia-friendly community in the Renfrew County. So I'm going to give you a few quick facts about dementia, the prevalence and so forth, specifically for the county, what a dementia-friendly community and a dementia-friends approach in terms of a regional strategy might look like, and more importantly, what some of the beginning points might be in terms of a partnership with you. So in terms of prevalence, latest statistics suggest that there are as many as 564,000 Canadians diagnosed with a term called dementia. We know that there are far more than that that don't necessarily even receive a diagnosis or are not even referred or certainly don't receive supports or education or information. So approximately 1 in 1,000 under the age of 65 develops a term called early onset. That is more rare and more unusual. 1 in 11 Canadians over the age of 65 have some form of dementia. There are a variety of types of dementia as well as a variety of progression. So folks can start with something as simple as memory loss, and then it can progress to something that's really quite debilitating, where they've lost the ability to function, to live independently. The health system goal, healthcare, our goal is to have as many people remain living at home in their home communities with the right services and supports put in place so that they can live as independently as possible in their own home environments and their own familiar communities. For folks who suffer with late-stage dementia, sometimes those challenges can be quite overwhelming for the caregiver. 72% of Alzheimer's disease, that's just one type of dementia. The cases are women, and about 70% of care partners are women. So in Renfrew County, 20% of your population is over the age of 65, and of that, so that means about 1,400, almost 1,500 residents in your county are over the age of 65. So the likelihood of this being a community concern of the illness of dementia affecting a fairly high percentage of your community population, we know is quite high. So what is dementia? Very briefly, it's a set of symptoms, sort of an umbrella term for a number of specific types of dementia. Alzheimer's, of course, being the most common one, and some of the very early signs of most of these dementias would be something like a significant memory loss. And we're talking about the kind of memory loss that is quite debilitating, where you don't remember that you've left your keys on the counter. You really can't you have no cognition that you don't have your keys. So we don't have time today to go into what that would look like, but those are some of the early warning signs: memory loss, changes in mood, just changes in inability to recognize safety issues, those kinds of things. Again, Alzheimer's being the most common. Other forms of dementia, vascular is sort of the second most common, and that would be dementia related to folks who, as an example, have suffered a stroke. And so there's been lack of oxygen for a prolonged period of time, and so the brain function has been negatively affected by that, and a few other forms there. So what is a dementia friend? And this is really our invitation or the conversation that we can engage in now. Our organization, our mandate is to reduce stigma, raise awareness, educate the broader community. Our focus is on support for caregivers who are actually supporting those in the community, but we know it requires a community response. There's not enough healthcare dollars on the planet that will respond to all of the needs that will be presented with us. So we know we need a social response and a community response to this huge health issue. So a dementia friend begins very simply by learning what it's like to live with dementia, and then turns that understanding into simple actions that can help people with dementia live well. I was thinking about your newly formed hockey team, assisting folks who are struggling with dementia to a hockey game, right? Something as simple as that, extending an invitation, making sure that they're still able to attend the county fair if they've historically attended that and enjoyed that. Some of those very common, what I call neighborly manners, might be extended to folks struggling with dementia. So the invitation is to sort of step up and to learn more about dementia so that you can strengthen your own community by becoming community champions, and then commit to what you can do as individuals to decrease the social isolation of people living with dementia. And if you engage and participate in those kinds of things, then you really can, as community champions, change the face of dementia for your community. And I'm not sure if you just want to take a moment and just think about if dementia, the phenomena of dementia has affected you personally to date. You may have an elderly aunt or uncle, mother or father, grandparent, a neighbor, a former work colleague, and you know that this illness has impacted someone that perhaps you're close to yourself. And so you know it's a pervasive illness, but there are things we can do to support people living as independently as they can, and support caregivers who sort of take on that burden of care. So dementia-friendly communities, it's actually a national campaign by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and elsewhere in the world have adopted this notion of becoming a dementia-friendly community. And so that's your opportunity, and we would, as the Dementia Society, would love to partner with you around that. It's increasing your community awareness, the education level in your community around this particular concern. At the agency or at the organizational level, you can inspire your colleagues, inspire your community members to get on board by offering or taking training to become a dementia-friendly community. And at the municipal level, perhaps establish targets for how many community members may become more educated and more familiar with the phenomena of dementia. So these are just a few ideas. We can chat about that further. So dementia-friendly communities obviously will be championed by people. We can host dementia-friendly workshops, as an example, and many other forms of education specific to this illness. We may be able to consider changes in policy so that folks who are struggling with dementia might be better served by folks at Parks and Rec, as an example. It may impact community planning. Maybe there are some accommodations or things that can be made by your community planners. And then in terms of practice, professional groups, it's about raising awareness and skill building from everyone from the bank teller to the fellow who's organizing the town fair to the fellow who's working at the arena, to be aware that folks with dementia can live successfully with support, education, and particularly caregivers and family members. So our proposal, and this again has been at the invite of a few folks in the community already, it's our organization mandate. Our main office is, of course, in Ottawa. We do have a satellite office in Ironprior. We have 2 full-time staff who work out of that office, but they work across the Renfrew County, including Beachburg as an example, and so forth. So it wouldn't necessarily be just our organization and just our staff. We would be working in partnership with your health colleagues, and it would be under a community working group that would establish who can facilitate the training, but certainly it's our organization mandate, and we're happy to support this initiative. So we would be offering free training for the following priority groups as an example, and these groups have been identified by Jordan and the initial working group. Perhaps we could train as many as 25 municipal staff initially. It might be a bit of a pilot and see how that goes, with as many as 15 additional community representatives. So they might be volunteers already working specifically in municipal services or elsewhere in the community. And certainly Cornwall has trained their volunteer firefighters and other first responders, so also an opportunity. Again, not training people to provide dementia interventions per se, not training people in providing caregiver strategies, but really just training people in the phenomena of dementia and what some of the early warning signs, as an example, might look like, and then educating folks in terms of what services and supports might be available in your own region. So the rationale here is really to look at an integrated community response to this phenomenon that is going to be experienced by your community. So we know that statistically it's here to stay, and so it will impact. There will be economic costs associated with it, there will be social costs associated with it, and obviously healthcare costs. So our suggestion, our offer is to launch an initial training, perhaps 3 hours long. Again, the working group can sort of establish that, how we would plan for that, the details around that the working group could establish, but we're ready to consider this for sometime later in the fall, depending on the availability of staff and the commitment from the community. The timelines, as I mentioned, we're looking at possibly as early as late October or early November. There would be an evaluation, and it would be, we would, in concert with the working group, we would establish who the targeted populations of folks the municipality might want to be trained first. And we're happy to be a part of those discussions, and we're really quite nimble and flexible. If you think there are other target populations that might benefit from initial training, we'd be more than happy to respond to that. So that's sort of the initial conversation. Again, it was at the invitation of Jordan and others. I understand that there's been some interest expressed by the community, so I'm happy to answer any questions. So we're here at your invitation and happy to respond.
72% women, is that because they live longer? Do you think that?
It could be.
And is there any lifestyle that would cause dementia, or just anybody can have?
You know, it's interesting. We often get asked what are the risk factors. So the risk factors for dementia are actually very similar to any of the risk factors for other chronic illnesses. They're very similar. So an unhealthy lifestyle, as an example, a chronic injury over time, as an example, unhealthy diet. So all of the things that might be risk factors for diabetes, for heart and stroke, those kinds of things, similar risk factors. We know there's still no cure, right? There's lots of research being done, certainly in Canada and around the world, but there is still no cure for Alzheimer's. There is some treatment available, primarily pharmacology, but in fact the progression of the illness, the medications only delay the progression of the illness. They actually don't prevent it from its ultimate progression. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to commend you for bringing this presentation forward. I think it's a great idea. Society over time has struggled with such issues as mental illness, alcoholism, and the list goes on. And to erase all those stigmas is a very important thing, and I would support this to the hilt for the sake of 3 hours. I think when you mentioned about us thinking for a minute, I doubt very much if there's any of us have not experienced this. And if you haven't, just look over here, because I'm still struggling with my keys. But thank you.
Councillor Olmsted.
Do you folks do any work in conjunction with the age-friendly community group? this sounds like the start of kind of what they are proposing across Ontario.
So I know Age Friendly Ottawa, our CEO sits on that committee in Ottawa. So age friendly, dementia friendly, really the challenge is how do our communities respond to all of these varying needs. I'm not for a moment suggesting that dementia specifically should be a higher priority for your community at all. I think looking at how a community can respond to, for sure, seniors, a high percentage of seniors will have dementia, but responding to both those needs, I think similarly would be important. So we absolutely would work in concert if they're generally age-friendly is about a broad public awareness campaign. So I think the two would dovetail very, very well. But if there's a particular initiative that's already happening here in this county, then we would certainly want to bring those folks to the table as well.
I know for age-friendly, it is much broader, but there's public funding available to help your community to become age-friendly, and there's a number of parameters you have to go through, and it's almost like a contest where they award so many communities every year a certain amount of funding for them to become age-friendly, and it's quite a process, but there's a lot of different buckets, and this sounds like one of the buckets that they're looking at is this early education.
Mm-hmm. It's a starting point, right? I have no idea where the conversations of this community were to begin. It would be some beginning points, and then typically, if there's some success at the beginning, then we're able to leverage and to spread and scale up, and certainly working with other organizations. What I didn't mention was we'd also be very interested in working cooperatively with service clubs. We know historically that Rotary, Kinsman, I'm not sure who support Legion for sure, Civitan, okay, so Lions Club. So we know that, so we would include all of those folks, all of those host of volunteers who intersect with folks all of the time, and sometimes those folks are the first beginning points of folks being identified. Sometimes it's the fellow at the Legion who knows that, John just isn't quite the same these days, and that's maybe about all they know, but that's enough of a starting point for sure.
Well, with two parents in their late 70s, I'm on board with the Reeve that I would absolutely support this.
Great, thank you.
It must be good to be in a small village, like we have small villages in our township. People would know these people. People know their history. They know who their family is, so that's got to be a good thing, isn't it?
In many ways, you have an advantage, right? Because it's less likely that someone who is really suffering and struggling, who shows up to the bank and wants to withdraw, $1,500 and take it next door to buy I'm not sure what, and it's highly unusual behavior, it's likely that will be noticed far more urgently and much more quickly than it would in a large urban setting like Ottawa. Absolutely. So there would be advantages for sure, right? In a community response, you can sort of shore up your service clubs, neighborhoods. You can arm, a high school crew to sort of help and support, provide snow shoveling to seniors as an example, and you can make it a competition. I've been involved in a number of really creative things, and my experience is the smaller communities tend to be able to leverage and tend to be able to rally more quickly because, frankly, there's perhaps less bureaucracy and less layers and layers of decision-making that need to happen. Mm-hmm.
Councillor Regular?
Just as you were touched on I was just thinking the education system, because there has been success stories where younger children, aged, grade 2, 3, 4, have been a great success, with elders. And we have an opportunity with 2 nursing homes right in our own backyard, and we've got our own, our schools, and I was just thinking that might just be a good opportunity. And just like the rest of council, I am very much on board with this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, those ideas. Sorry.
I was just going to say, Kathy, I think that's really a number of years ago, the Cobden Public School and Caress and Care did a project like that, and it was really highly successful. So, yes, it's a great link, and that there's some new programs in Australia that are focusing on that as well, only much broader. So. exciting stuff.
Internationally, there's a lovely initiative where they've taken university students and housed them with seniors and housed them with seniors who are struggling with dementia, and so it creates a really amazing sense of community. So you're training young people to care for, and they sort of become expert in their own right, and sort of the vibrancy that's occurring as a result of those kinds of really innovative and creative partnerships. There's no telling what can be accomplished in this county for sure.
Councillor McLaughlin?
I was just going to ask Sue, because I am a member of the Civitan Club, would you be interested in presenting to our club?
I'd be pleased, very pleased.
Would you? Could you give me your contact then?
Absolutely.
All right, that would be perfect.
And I'll extend that invitation if there are, other opportunities. It may not be necessarily me. I can lean to my good colleague here, Bonnie, who's very capable as well. And also we have 2 staff members who also do these kinds of speaks across the county, as well as if there's interest, we will make sure we have staff. We also have the privilege of having a host of volunteers who support our Speakers Bureau, and they are more than happy to present this kind of information in as much detail or as informally or formally as you might like. We're happy to tailor it to you.
Okay, that would be great, because those are things that I think our club needs to know, so we can get on board with it as well. And you're probably speaking to about 80% that are over 65.
Okay,
so.
that would be a lovely opportunity. Thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions from council? Then I will add. I have had maybe a lot of experience with dementia through the years with loved ones, and it's something that's very difficult. It's something that's not well enough understood in the public. There are people are afraid of anything that's different. So. Just a little, I had an aunt and uncle who would phone me so that I could explain to them how to get their car out of the garage. And it was very difficult because they were along the lines, being aunts and uncles, they were kind of my childhood heroes. And it was so sad to watch. And it's some kinds of dementia is very fast, and sometimes it's very slow. And so I would like to bring forward a motion of support, and I will ask for a mover. Councillor Regier, and seconded by Reeve Miller. All those in favour? Carried.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to mention as well that tomorrow is World Alzheimer's Day, and September is World Alzheimer's Month. So it's really nice to see the township taking the leadership to provide this kind of awareness, and it's really timely, I think. Thank you.
I'm very interested in taking that 3-hour course. I still work for a living, and so it's going to be hard in the near future, but I think we'll all want to take it, so we will work something out with you. Okay,
and
thank you.
We'll be happy to work along with you. We're also, it doesn't necessarily need to be daytime. We can also do evening, Saturdays. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan and Bonnie. And I'm going to change. I'm just going to go there for the rest of the life. Reeve Miller, right? Reeve Miller, right? You got to come to the head of the SO.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. He did show you the. You have to say that's hilarious.
Kind of sad. How do you know Lois? No, Lois.
Pardon me? Oh, no, I'm just ready, thank you.
Anyways, like she was always a really smart woman, and she's sad. And it'd be sad for his kids, you know, because he was in charge. My parents had the decency to die, one at 56, and one at 75. See? We didn't really plan that. I was just thinking, like, I went downstairs the other day and said, what am I down here for? Okay.
Okay, at 6:34, I'd like to bring the Building and Property Services portion together. We have one recommendation today in this department. Will I read that, Robert? Okay, we have a recommendation that the Building and Property Services Committee recommend Council of the Township of Whitewater Region approve the following comments to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry on the draft environmental evaluation report. The proposed designations are in keeping with existing land use designations for two subject properties for the Grant Settlement Road. Existing adjacent private property access must be maintained through appropriate easements to the travel portions of the Moxham Road must be recognized on title. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Mayor Johnson, second by Councillor Mackay. And do we have discussion? Sure. I'm going to let Rob give you a quick overview on this.
So just there's some information on the Algonquin land claim process, but just a few pieces. These two parcels are currently Crown. If and when they're transferred to the Algonquins, they will become a taxable property. So they will be subject to municipal taxation. The purpose of this is the actual uses, which are essentially rural with some constraints. What's important here is to ensure that there is some adjacent land uses off of Moxham further in where people are accessing through trails and such through that Grant Settlement Road property. So we want to make sure that is continued. And Moxham Road, Janet and I and Randy went down there. I think road should be in parentheses. It's a bit of a trail in there, and it doesn't necessarily follow the road allowance. So as they clean up title and ensure that the proper easements, we just want to make sure the Moxham Road is identified. The second property is on in the Haley area on Garden of Eden. So those are the only two parcels within the township that would be affected by this, but important to note that once the land is transferred, those properties will become taxable. Right now, they're in Crown, so we don't get any taxes or in lieu payments for them. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Councillor Mackay.
This is part of the land claim for the Algonquins. So they're not really trying to get any private land, is that right? Or not in our township anyway?
To my understanding, it's Crown land that's being transferred.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, that's good.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll call for a vote then. All those in favor? And it's carried. And that was the only item on building, so I'll close it off there. Oh, I'm sorry,
No,
Councillor McLaughlin.
just for Rob, I know it's on Garden of Eden, but can you distinguish, can you tell me about where? I know where the lot is, the portion is on the Grand Settlement Road. I'm not aware.
If you look on the report, the map, so it's page 4 of the report, you'll see it as parcel 245. So it's really approaching kind of the eastern boundary of the township. Adjacent to that, I don't know.
That would be down off 653.
Yes. So on page 6 is the adjacent land. If we zoom out, yeah. And if you go to the earlier map, the top one, yeah, this one. It's right here. So it's at the very end.
That sounds, Darrell, right in around Josh Kelly's.
Yeah, that's right by my old farm.
And I should mention that as part of this process, any adjacent landowners got direct notification. And there is a public open house where people can get more information about it. And that's in Pembroke on October 5th at the Germania Club. And the times for the open house are from 4 to 8 p.m. So anyone that would be interested in this are encouraged to go to the Germania Club on October 5th.
I always said it's carried. Okay, we're good. Corporate services. Who's that? Kathy.
Okay, we'll bring the corporate services to order. And I have a recommendation here that the Corporate Services Committee receive the draft 2018 budget schedule for information purposes. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Mackay. And we will turn this over to Marcia. Thank you.
Okay, so with Rob's push, he's interested in having the budget prepared much earlier this year. So we're hoping to have the operating and the capital items as well as the user fees and water and wastewater budgets passed before the year end. This will allow for the managers to prepare their work plans, get their capital projects started, basically start at the new year. Unfortunately, it does put a little extra meetings onto council, but I think we can work through it quickly. The one thing that we're going to do this year is, for the 2018 budget, we're going to start off basically with a zero surplus or a zero deficit. As years in the past, we've always started off, if we had a surplus, we started that year off with that surplus. So at the end of the year, because we won't know what the surplus is till the auditors are done. And the auditors won't be here till February, and they normally come in April to present the financial statements to council. So that's what we're proposing to council. Oh, and I'm going to try real hard not to be sick this year and do it in the hospital between IVs.
Thanks, Marcia. And Rob, I know it looks aggressive, but I think it's something that a lot of us have often thought about.
Yeah.
And I'm anxious I'm looking forward to doing this. I think it will be very beneficial for all of us. Does anyone have any comments? Councillor McLaughlin and then Councillor.
I'm just wondering, are we going to look at the water rates before budget, or I know we mentioned that last year, and I don't know where it went to, because there was some issues last year on some of the fees that were being disputed. So I think it would be prudent that we look at that before we do a finalize on the budget.
If I may, Madam Chair, Janet has a report a little later on a previous request regarding a water rate metering. What we've discovered is the water study and the wastewater study do not include any capital items. So the rates right now are really solely based on how we operate. And that is not good. And what we need to do is have the 10-year capital plan for all our plants and all our infrastructure so that the rates are based on reality, which is aging infrastructure. That is going to take some time to do, likely into 2018. So what we're probably going to be looking at is, I wouldn't call it status quo, because there are some construction projects that are kind of going to be planned and be brought forward to council, and the rates will be subject to that. But there is some work we need to do from an asset management plan and understanding the capital works that will be required at the plants and in the systems over the next 10 years, and that is needed for the full update of the study regarding the rates. So what we're going to do is proceed with that in 2018, an understanding of our assets, and then redo the study, the rate study, hopefully either late in 2018 or in 2019, depending. And I don't know if Janet wanted to add anything with regard to the asset management capital side of the operations, or does that cover it?
Okay, no, generally, as we said, and it was presented previously when we talked about Watson and Associates as one company that does that type of work, our intent is to try and It keeps going, oh, there we go, sorry. Anyways, so what we want to do is get a really good concept of what actually our assets are, their replacement costs, and then the conditions.
What's going on your report?
Okay, so what we're going to do is in this next year, and we'll be looking at potentially either doing it in-house, we will probably need some assistance to get the capital works, get a good assessment, their life cycle costs, and get that put together in the next year. And as Rob indicated, either at the end of 2018 or 2019, we'll be bringing a report back to have an economist-type group, not necessarily the one mentioned, but that nature of firm, to put together a new water rate. So it'll look at everything together, which would include wastewater as well, and it will include capital works.
Good, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin, and then Councillor, one more. Is it related to?
Well, this would be to Marcia, because I'm thinking a lot about this meter rate that was like $10 or something. Is that not correct? That hasn't been addressed, has it? No. Okay. That's where my issues were coming. I understand all of what that we need to, yes, and I totally agree with what you're saying, but I think that was one issue that I thought should be addressed before we move forward with. Somehow, I don't know.
I think on that one, though, we did establish a minimum charge last year in the rates bylaw, which would help
The residential.
for the so it would apply to whatever the residential rate. So that one specific case has been addressed. But if there's any one-offs or just that type of thing, that's something that we can do as part of the budget process when we adopt the budget in terms of a minimum. It's just the overall strategy and the overall rates, consumption versus base, et cetera, and incorporating capital. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we're hopeful that work can be done by 2019 for the setting of the next rates. But that one situation was addressed this year. With the establishment of a minimum rate.
As long as that has been, there was a couple of issues, and I agree with what you're saying, and maybe if we could look at those at budget time, those couple of issues, and we'll deal with those, I would be happy with that.
Very good, thank you. Very patient, Councillor Olmsted.
Do we expect to have Q3 year-to-date pretty much finalized before we dive into 2018?
Yeah, we expect likely the regular meeting before that. On the 20th, we would do the quarterly report for the third quarter, and Marcia always provides an update of the numbers by that time. So we will, yes, on October 18th, I believe, that meeting is usually when we come back. The second meeting in the month following the quarter, we have a quarterly report, and then the first special meeting will occur the following week. So yeah, we'll have some updated numbers for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? Very good. Then we'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Pencil wasn't gonna cut it for long. Not that I'm writing anything.
We'll start the community services portion of the meeting. Item A is the MNR land use permit for beach aeration system. There is a report. The recommendation that Community Service Committee recommend Council of the Township Whitewater Region enact a bylaw to authorize a memorandum of understanding with the Muskrat Watershed Council regarding the beach aeration system project and funding. I have a mover, Councillor McLaughlin, seconder to the Mayor, and Robert.
So this is, you'll recall there was a notice of motion that was passed by council to support this project. So it's a project that would cost about $32,000, half of which would be a grant and the other half would be an interest-free 3-year loan, which would be paid annually in installments. And this is meant to try to make the beach in Cobden usable, if we're to be frank. The project would be led by the Muskrat Watershed Council. We've applied for the permit kind of jointly, and the permit has been received. And then this just allows us to move forward with regard to ensuring that there's something in place to ensure the funding is confirmed by both parties and that the payments are made with regard to the loan. Generally speaking, I think they're ready to go. A lot of the work has to be done before October 1st based on the permit. So my understanding is work was going to start. The work has been started and done. So what this memorandum just does is just confirm the funding component. The system would be ours. So although the council is undertaking the project on our behalf and we're funding it, the system at the end of the day becomes ours. We're also responsible for hydro-related costs associated with the running of the aeration system.
Any questions or comments? Dave, you have a comment?
I don't think it's gonna work. I think it's hokum. Sorry. I looked at it, thought it's not gonna work.
You're allowed your opinion.
Okay, right on.
Any other positive comments? You'll still vote for it though, right? There are. I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Do you want it recorded? No. Thank you. I know where you live. Second item on the agenda is Whitewater Kings Home Games Municipal Significance Designation. Recommendation that Community Services Committee recommend Council of the Township Whitewater Region declare the 2017 home games of the Whitewater Kings at the Cobden Astrolabe Arena as community events of municipal significance in keeping with the requirements of the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario for special occasion permits, and confirm that the events do not knowingly contravene any municipal bylaws. Maybe do you want me to take that? A mover? The Mayor, seconder, we'll go this side. The Reeve. The reason that we've had to do this, so we've applied for a alcohol license, a liquor license for the entire facility, a permit license. So not a regular SOP. That is currently being done. We were initially told 4 to 6 weeks. It turns out it's 4 to 6 months of process. So we're going through the process as we speak. But in the interim, we've had to apply for individual special occasion permits for each game. So last Saturday night, we operated on a special occasion permit. We talked to the LCBO in Pembroke, and they are quite fine with us. Actually, it was their suggestion that we go ahead and apply for individual SOPs until such time that the full license comes into effect. So in order to do that, we have to declare that each game is a municipal significant event. Does that kind of cover it? Yes?
Just a quick question. Is that limited to upstairs there? Or is that...
The license won't be limited. We can, my understanding is that the township will be able to enforce where we want, once the full license is up, you're speaking about the full license or just the SOP?
Yeah, well, say Saturday night.
Saturday night is limited just to the upstairs.
I see.
Yep, the regular SOPs are limited to just the upstairs. On the permit, I think it houses 261 people are allowed to be consuming alcohol upstairs. But the full permit is for the full arena, but the township can designate the area, so we can say it's for game nights, it is only for upstairs. For instance, there's a significant event coming from Opeongo High School. They're having their 50th anniversary coming up this spring, I believe, in May. So we can designate the entire floor as an alcohol permitted area. So the township will control the areas where it's allowed. Good. Mayor?
And my understanding is once the big license is approved, that they can sell booze in the stands.
If the township so chooses.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, it saves you a lot of walking, right?
Darrell, did you have your hand up? No? Any further questions? I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? You voted for that one. Great. Will marijuana be sold there? No marijuana. That ends the Community Services meeting. And it's not me, it's Councillor Mackay is up.
Economic Development and Tourism, and Rural Economic Grant Application Township entrance signs. Want to take that, Rob?
The Economic Development and Tourism Committee recommend Council Township of Whitewater Region support the red grant application and support of township entrance signs. If you want to get a mover and seconder first.
I get a mover and a seconder. Kathy Regier and Chris Homestead.
So this one, Mr. Chair, the red grant, we were just recently successful in getting it for the community improvement plan process up to $50,000. So this is a 50% grant funding. What we're looking at is, you know, we're starting the First Impressions community exchange with the town of Arnprior. So we'll be getting some feedback from our guests, and they'll be getting some feedback from us on the first impression that we give. A quick review with our summer interns that we had is, it turns out that we don't have any signage coming in from any of the county roads into the township. So people are aware that they're in Whitewater Region. And as you know, the hundreds of thousands of people that come whitewater rafting, that come up Queen's Line and turn onto Grant Settlement Road, but when they're in Whitewater Region, they wouldn't really know it. So we're actually working on our new website, which speaks to some of the great things that the township has to offer. The issue is, if you don't know you're in the township, how are you going to know where to look for some of that information? So we felt that this is probably a priority to look at. There's 7 kind of roads that would be susceptible to this, as well as either end of the abandoned CN and CP lines that are being used for snowmobile, but also being converted to multi-use trails. So that would be a total of 4 extra signs. These would be fairly kind of basic general signs that would have our new logo and welcome, bienvenue, and nothing too crazy, but at least people would know where they are. The other part of this would be to undertake some kind of routine maintenance to the existing gateway signs and features that are on Highway 17. There's some photos in the report that show some of the deterioration we're seeing. And again, updating the look and feel of those, because they don't correspond with either our previous logo or our new logo. So there's some work to be done. One small thing that I should add, and I would if the mover and seconder agree to this amendment, in talking with staff at OMAFRA, they mentioned that work such as this has to be tied into an overall kind of signage marketing strategy. So I haven't written the grant yet. It's due on the 29th. So I would just recommend a friendly amendment if the mover, Councillor Regier, and Councillor Olmsted would support it. So it would read, in support of township entrance signs and signage/marketing strategy.
Like
So-
sheep or something.
Yeah, so basically you can tell there's lots of deterioration on the existing gateways, so fixing those two and then a total of 11 signs so that entering any points from the township, people would know where they are. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We just received a RED grant. This is a competitive process, so I'm just want to point out that we just got a very generous grant, so I'm not sure if it means that we won't get in this intake, but it's worth a try, and it's worth applying if we can get 50% funding for a project.
Any questions? Okay, we can vote on it.
And then the friendly amendment, if the mover and seconder are okay with that, and signage and marketing strategy.
Okay, are you guys okay with that friendly amendment? Said yes. Can we vote on it now? All in favor? Okay, you're voting for it. Carried. All right, thanks for everything.
I've been very much in favor of doing these signs for a long time, and I have noticed these signs that have been deteriorating too. They've gotten to the point there now, they're just beyond, if you know what you're looking for, to anybody can see it from the road. So I think this is marvelous.
Councillor McLaughlin for Fire and Emergency Services.
Okay, I'll call the Fire and Emergency Services Committee meeting to order. And first item on the agenda is a report from NDMP grant application. I'll turn it over to Robert.
The Fire Emergency Committee recommend Council of the Township of Whitewater Region support the National Disaster Mitigation Program NDMP grant application in support of a township risk assessment.
Discussion? Oh. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Mayor Johnson, second by Councillor Olmsted. Discussion? Janet?
The National Disaster Mitigation Program is actually a federal program. We personally cannot submit. What we need to do is submit to the province, and the province then submits to the feds, so it goes through both processes. We've provided everything to date, and we have provided, Rob has signed off on it, but we would like to follow up because of the format with a council declaration, obviously this being this recommendation. We're actually doing a risk assessment. We couldn't apply further for further programs. There's about 4 programs until we have this part of it completed. So we're actually hoping to get an intern and or a consultant, depending next summer, to put together a full risk assessment and assist us with the program. We do have some funding sufficient to both pay the person for the portion and do some paperwork and, you know, whatever else we need to purchase to complete that portion of the program.
Questions? No questions? Then I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And that ends the Emergency Services Committee meeting. And we'll move on to Physical Services. And the first item on the list is a report of private road naming Brown Pine Trail and Hamath Trail. And I'll turn it over to Rob.
That the Physical Services Committee recommend Council Township of Whitewater Region enact a bylaw to name private roads Hamish Trail and Brown's Pine Trail. So just noting that correction in the recommendation from Point to Pine. And if you get a mover and seconder, Janet could provide just a quick outline.
Moved by Councillor Mackay, second by Councillor Rager. Go ahead, Janet.
We're just catching up with some past severances that private roads have been constructed. The first one is Hamish Trail. As you can see coming in, it is off of La Pointe Trail. It's been described. I have already applied to the county and have the name on hold. So it has been approved. Following this process, bylaw will be passed and we'll proceed with 911 and et cetera, civic addressing. The second road is Brown's Pine Trail. We have it written as both here and there. I'm going to blame it on autocorrect, but I can't guarantee that was the issue. And it is severances that are coming off of Malloy Road. So again, it has been described. I believe there has been some access right along the waterfront, but this is being moved back a piece to the rear of the lots and across. So again, that one has been put on reserve on hold at the county and has already been approved with them.
If I can add, just interestingly enough, the Municipal Act requires public notice to name private roads. However, it doesn't require us to give public notice before we name public roads. So that's something that hasn't been caught. So we have given the notice required, and this is that formality to adopt it by bylaw.
Any other discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Now, I guess it's B, and I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
That the Physical Services Committee recommend Council Township of Whitewater Region support the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund Application-Based Component Intake 2, OSIF, grant application for reconstruction of John Street plus or minus 91 meters, Truelove Street plus or minus 226 meters, and Crawford Street plus or minus 140 meters.
Janet, do you want to, okay, yes I do. I need a mover. Councillor Olmsted, second by Councillor Mackay. And now I'll turn it over to Janet.
Okay, this is OSIF. We were not successful. I do not believe in 2015 or 16 we had applied for Truelove. Since that time we have had the engineering done. It's being done as we speak. The surveying portion has been completed. I actually have been speaking with the consultant, and tomorrow I will be receiving an estimate that I can use as part of the grant. We've actually considered, and they're going to provide us a rough estimate as well for Cowley Street. We're looking at doing curbs, sidewalk on one side, and replacing all of the infrastructure as needed. That may be a percentage of the storm, but most of the others will be replaced. The application is due on Wednesday, so we will have to get moving on that. But as part of it, I don't see a formal declaration within it. It used to be you had to typically had to pass a very, formal set out letter. So what we will do is include this. As the more you can include, the better off we are. And it basically says that council agrees to do the funding. So, pardon? Well, ballpark costs are about $1 million a half kilometre, and we are about a half a kilometre when you add that up. So adding Cowley to it would be a little bit more. Again, that's just a telephone conversation with rough estimated dollars based on tenders within this area. So we'll have a little bit more information, but we were very pleased with that. It was certainly lower than we have looked at in the past, and we'll be able to play when we actually get to the documentation a bit with the engineering. You can't claim anything that's been done to date, but we certainly could put in a contract administration.
Councillor Mackay.
So that's drainage, sewer, and paving the road.
Water, sanitary sewer, and portions of our storm sewer as required. Concrete sidewalk on one side of each road, curb on the other, and hot mix asphalt.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Johnson.
Just to be clear, this falls in with our agreement or obligation with our separating of the sewer and storm. This will satisfy some of those issues also?
I don't know necessarily about separating, but it certainly will address infiltration. We do know we have issues on infiltration around a number of manholes, and we're going to bring that forward as part of capital on other roads as well. And hopefully we can capture any drains that have been connected, cross connections.
Yeah, that's quite key in order to reduce the flow, and that was something that we had agreed to. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Rob.
Just one quick point, because I was trying to mouth it for Janet. She knows this as well, is that this is 90% funding, so on I believe it's 90%, Janet?
I've done so many grants.
Yeah, I believe so.
I believe it
so
is.
should
Yes,
we
it
be
was very
successful
high.
on a project of this importance, of this size? We've tried twice, but now it's literally shovel ready, so we think that we're hopeful that this will be approved, and you will likely see the non-grant covered portion budgeted for 2018 in hopes that we do get it, but at least we will budget the non-grant eligible portion of the project. Councillor Mackay.
Is this a federal government, or provincial?
I believe it's combined, is it not? Federal and provincial.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, then I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And now we're going to move on to C, which is a report for the water meters. And Rob?
The Physical Services Committee recommend Council of the Township of Whitewater Region approve not altering the present method of charging of water and wastewater services within the 4 municipal systems, subject to the completion at a future date of a water and wastewater rate study and evaluation of a method of charging for water and wastewater services that meets or exceeds legislative requirements, as well as considers operational, capital, and growth-related costs.
Okay, I think we've gone through this discussion already. Is there any other discussion towards this? Or Janet, would you like? Oh, I guess so. I keep forgetting movers and say I'm not used to this. Moved by Councillor Mackay, second by Councillor Olmsted. Janet?
Okay, it kind of follows along what we were discussing earlier as far as assessing our asset management and getting a good grasp on our capital works. But what this is saying is that with regards to the water meter in particular. So basically, in order to create water and build water, there's a base cost to it. And I'm going to give you a really simple example. To cook a dozen cookies costs you $10. To cook 3 dozen cookies costs you $13, not $30. So water is much the same. There's a cost for the facilities, for the chemicals. You have to have it staffed and manned a certain amount of time. Yes, as you increase water, there is a cost to that, but it's nominal as it increases. Till you hit a point where growth has exceeded your plant, and that's when you are redoing a plant or expanding it with major capital. So there's a few different ways of paying, and that is a flat rate, and basically that's what we do now, is a flat rate to our users. Another suitable method is to pay a base rate, so you calculate out what it actually costs us to run that plant and build this quantity of water, and that's the bare minimum, and that's what the costs are. Anything above and beyond that, so as users use more water, they pay for more water, but everybody pays that base fee. There's combinations of that as well. And I think these are items that as we figure out what our true costs are, we'll have to evaluate. Another simple example is some places say, rather than have a residential and an industrial fee, what you may do is a half-inch line has a base rate of this, and any water usage is paid at a price. Anybody that has a 1-inch line this is their base rate and above is paid. So those are things we would want to look at when we have our actual water rates evaluated, and we'll come up with that. So really what staff are saying is that this time we do not want to start installing water meters whereby they're only paying for a small portion. We could not sustain our systems if we do that, because we're not capturing that base cost. So hopefully that's a brief or a simple explanation of how we cost water. And the reason for the 4 systems is we also have wastewater. And typically the amount of water you use, your wastewater would be charged at a percentage of that, because you assume maybe 30% goes to watering your lawn and washing your car, but 70% goes into the sewer system. So hopefully that's a quick explanation.
Any other discussion? Councillor Olmsted.
I think I've said it before, but as long as I'm on council, I will fight water meters tooth and nail to my death. And that is because of an experience I had when Renfrew decided to switch over to water meters. I owned a number of properties in Renfrew at the time, and we were getting billed at X amount. Water meters came in, and we were thinking the worst. Well, our rates dropped in half. So the next year, we were paying basically half of what we were the year before with water meters. We thought, great. The third year, we were paying triple what we were in the first year, because consumption went down, nobody was using water anymore. They did not account for all the water they were losing due to the system and infiltration, and well, not infiltration, but losing water in the ground and replacing infrastructure. And to this day, Renfrew, they're going through problems. You may know of some of the issues they have, especially in commercial properties, that nobody can afford water in Renfrew anymore. And subsequently, we sold all of our properties, and we're out of there. But if you want a public mutiny, install water meters in the township. You'll have some headaches.
Okay, well, that addresses the thought that I had. Okay.
Purchase them, there's all sorts of programs, and there's all different types of meters. Most now go with like a remote reader, so you just drive by and it picks it up. They're much like a hydrometer, there's good and bad to all different types, and failures can be found. And typically it would be a capital project that would go back, such as increasing your plant or anything else. So ultimately, yes, the user pays.
Okay, I think we've kind of beat it to death, and so I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And I think that ends our Physical Services Committee.